And if we were to answer that question, and it's very easy to answer that question in like fairly emotional ways, and each of us here has a story to tell about victims, about victimization, and about victimhood. And it is, but we have to talk rationally about these things in there. How do we hold government accountable for our safety and security? To what extent is government accountable for the rights of victims? Now, even in terms of the common law, if you're out in the street there, you get assaulted, you get robbed, you try to go and lay a charge, okay? And the charge is because we are subject to the rule of law. People cannot willy-nilly go around, transgress the law without any consequences. Now, being subject to the rule of law, I can expect that action will be taken against that particular person that violated my right or my bodily integrity or my property. But to what extent are that right enjoyed? And I'm mentioning it, and I'm asking this question in light of the fact of the underreporting of crime in South Africa. We all know, underreporting, like the crime statistics that we are dished out, that we received from the South African police are only reported crimes in South Africa. Now, it doesn't tell the whole story. It is young in the sense that it can identify trends. It is very, very helpful for us in reading the landscape of crime in South Africa. But if you look at the fact that such a lot, for instance, happen like beyond the policing capabilities of the police, social contact crime, things like that, the majority of crimes don't be reported. I can guarantee you every person in here has been a crime committed against them, being stolen of an apple at your house or whatever, that you haven't got to report to the police. That's a far cry, for instance, from being in Geneva and put on your sour 1 minute past 12 in the evening, and the next thing you know, they don't call the police. But yeah, there's a minor violation, this person's put on the sour thing. So that is the extent that our people there have a very, very high rate of reporting of crime. So we must ask ourselves, that right of me to rely on the law to protect my rights, and for the law to, why don't people avail themselves to the protection of the state? Because that, and those questions then, along those lines, there can be a clear violation, I think, of rights. So we have to look at structural problems. To what extent are the structural problems, be it in the police, the reporting of crime format, all these kinds of things, to what extent does it lend itself to that particular right of me being protected, being violated? And we talk about, okay, we must make our community police centers and police stations more user-friendly and all this kind of thing. And those are things that generally need to go on. People will tell me, the main reason, the number one reason is nothing is going to come of the matter. And it's then that we have to really look into, say, to what extent is the overall of the criminal justice system to make it more responsive to the needs of the people, should that not become like one of our number one priorities? Now we hear the government is like, we're working on it, all right, we are there, almost here, there, and there, but it's never been put on the front burner. People have been asking, like, shouldn't we have like a cabinet level position, for instance, of a person just tasked to see the restructuring of the criminal justice system? Like, these things may sound abstract, but this is like real implication for victims' rights across the board. My first thing is, like, at the end of that example that I use, I would write on the comment or just to go and lay a charge. That how are we going to restructure our criminal justice system to be more responsive to victims of crime, to entice people to listen here, if I go and lay a charge, that's overwhelming the chance that something is going to come of it. And we really need to intensify our efforts, I think, to look at how we deal with the overall criminal justice system. Now, government has terms of our rights, come out with the service standards for victims of crime. And we have just finalized last year the implementation plan for the service charter of victims of crime. The service charter, basically, the victim charter, as we commonly refer to it, I mean, it lists the 7 rights that people are entitled to. And among these rights, inter alia, are the right for victims to be treated with dignity, the right to offer information, to receive information, the right to compensation, and the right to restitution. Now, obviously, the last two is probably very contentious, and that is what irks people a lot. Is like, what are the perimeters? What do we mean when we talk about the right to compensation, the right to restitution? Well, that may be a little bit easier, but that is where things become real murky, and government becomes just vaguer and vaguer on like where they actually stand in terms of the right to compensation. But I'll get to that later. Now, victims, if you look at the victim charter, and these things for many people are abstract. Now, this thing has been rolled out so many times, and like last year, the implementation plan was launched, and so forth. I just did a cursory study. I went to 3 police stations, and I asked them for a copy of the victim charter. They didn't know what I was talking about. So do you know what a victim charter is? And I spoke to highly ranked officials. I mean, one was a captain and one was an inspector. They had no idea as to what a victim charter is. When government so boldly states that when you come into contact with the criminal justice system, and the police are usually the first point when you come to contact, when you're in charge or whatever, that everybody should be able to inform you about your rights as a victim. Now, it's sad if the concept of the victim's right, of the victim charter, has not been communicated to ordinary members. Now, it's okay for us to go and sit here in Pretoria, at GCIS usually we meet, and talk about these things, and you think that people are on top of things. But you know what, we're sitting there with deputy directors and chief directors and talk about these things, and it just doesn't go through to where it really matters, and it is like at the community service stations, at the police station level in this country. So if those people doesn't know about what constitutes the rights of victims of crime in any sense of South Africa, then we are really sitting here with one big problem. If we don't, in our hospitals, now we have the Tutuzela centers. There's only like a handful of Tutuzela centers. That being said, I just came back from a 3-day sexual offences in Dawa, where we discussed how better to get this Tutuzela care centers for rape victims working and so forth. And you know what, plans have been made again and so forth. And it's like Department of Land Affairs, they say like, in order to the Department of Land Affairs, like they spend 78% of their working hours in conferences, meetings, and seminars. And if you look at how many times we have like this kind of at government level talks at meetings, seminar, implementation plan to implement the other implementation plan, things like that. I mean, like, it's ridiculous. So, I mean, like, how do we increase the efficiency of government? To really, like, or to this disconnect between policy, existing plans, and implementation. There's a complete disconnect. And the problem is that we do it again with regards to victims of crime. When we, for instance, a victim comes into contact, and we say, some of these things are abstract, but we need to concretize. You come, the prosecutor, you are allowed to be informed when a person is as a bail hearing. But it's phrased as a victim of crime may be present when a suspect is applying for bail. May. I mean, that gets a lot of leeway to a prosecutor or investigating officer. I mean, like, these things must be made mandatory. That whenever a bail hearing, for instance, a person applies for bail, that the investigating officer should be compelled to go and inform the victim that, listen here, Jannie van Vuren is applying for bail at 3 o'clock this afternoon.